Hello, everybody, and Wingapo. My name is Sarah Quint, and I come to you as a guest on the land of the Potawatomi in southern Michigan. I'm a citizen of the Mattaponi tribe, and if you would do me the honor, I would love to introduce you to myself in my native tongue. Winganakoa, Neteriwin Sarah Quint. Mataponi de Napewak, Anir Nenawa, Senacomaca, Anir Nenawa. So what I said there is hello, greetings to you all. My name is Sarah Quint, and I am from the Mattaponi tribe in Senacomaca, which is present day Eastern Virginia. And I have been so looking forward to this conversation. Thank you to SheLoves magazine for allowing me to host this with Stephen Charleston, author and citizen of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, the retired Episcopal Bishop of Alaska, and the author of Ladder to the Light, as well as other books on spirituality from Native American perspective. Halito, Wingapo, Stephen.
Alito, Alito.
Halito.
Tuntukma. That's very good.
I did enough research.
Yeah, you caught me off guard on that. That's great.
Welcome. I've been looking forward to our conversation on your book.
Well, me too. Thank you for letting me be with you. I've been looking forward to this too, and I really enjoyed hearing your language. It's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes. And I thought we would share some of yours too. It's beautiful to hear these native tongues across our continent that often people don't get to hear at all, huh? And then it's so beautiful to hear them.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Sahachifo Stephen. My name is Stephen.
Yes. Well, and just so everybody knows, of course, I respect Stephen as my elder, but he has given us permission to address him as Stephen throughout this interview. Stephen, is there anything you would like to say outside of that formal introduction? Tell us where you're living and about your family, maybe?
Sure. I just kind of a sketch maybe of where I am at this point in my life. I'm living in Oklahoma. Although I've lived all around the country, I've returned to Oklahoma, which is where my people, the Choctaw people, are, and at least the Oklahoma community. We have a community in Mississippi and we have a community in Louisiana, but I'm from the Oklahoma Choctaw people, and Choctaw Okla, we say Okla, the people, all of the people. And we arrived in Oklahoma on the Trail of Tears back in the 1830s, which many other Eastern nations did as native community nations as they were driven west. So I have a history of that. My family came over on the Trail of Tears, and that sort of memory always stirred in me deep spiritual questions about life. And I think it sort of led me into writing and thinking and talking with people about spirituality. It's so important to me because of that history. I guess that's about it. My son is actually a teacher in the Choctaw Nation of our traditional language. He's a native language speaker and teacher. And my wife, Susan, is an artist, and she did the covers of many of my books.
Beautiful. I love that. Well, thank you for that a little less formal introduction and peek into your life. So today, I wanted to talk with you about your latest book. I'm lucky to have many of your books on my shelf, but your latest book, Ladder to the Light, an Indigenous Elders' Meditations on Hope and Courage. Speaking of cover art, I don't know if your wife did this one, but it is beautiful.
No, she didn't actually, but it is a lovely cover, isn't it? It's very nice.
It captured my eyes before I even got into the book. Mm-hmm. I think it matches the insides of the book quite well. So, well, you launched this book in the middle of a pandemic. So I'm thankful to be discussing this today because I don't want it to get lost in the middle of all the pandemic and the stuff that was going on, because I think it's timely. I think it's a really beautiful book. But you talk about in this book, you share personally how your great-grandfather expressed to you and your family that you would be a spiritual guide, helping others to find their way. And you've done that, and we shared a little bit of that in the introduction, being a retired bishop over Alaska. You've also been a professor and president and dean of the Episcopal Divinity School. So it's very evident how you've used some of that gift in your life. And then suddenly Facebook came about, huh? And your path took an interesting turn. Would you share with me how this book came about, and particularly how Facebook was involved?
I would say it started when I first heard about Facebook. I didn't want to be on Facebook. I often tell people I don't have any pictures of cats that I can share, or at that time I didn't have a lot of grandchildren, and I didn't have recipes. I didn't go on any interesting vacations. So I thought, I don't belong on Facebook. I have nothing to say. But some friends kept encouraging and telling me it's social media, it's how to, especially if you're getting older, and it's a way to stay in touch. Make a long story short, I got on Facebook. I signed up for it, and then I did not know what to write. I joke about it, but that first blank screen on Facebook to say something, I didn't know what to say. And so I decided, since I didn't have a lot of the other things people share on social media, that the one thing I could share is whatever came into my mind after I said my morning prayer, my morning devotional time, little prayer time to start the day, and I would write whatever I was thinking. And I started doing that as my way of contributing or being part of the Facebook experience. And at the beginning, there were 4 people who were my friends on Facebook. Well, through all of these years, in a nutshell, what's happened is this. I think that those little meditations, those little thoughts I would write, which I've been doing now, I don't know, maybe 10 years or something. It just keeps going every day. And I write them every day but Saturday, and I put them on Facebook. Well, I never expected or intended for that to be much more than just a handful of people, but I think there was something in those little words that touched people or helped people. And particularly because the nature of what I did was inclusive. It's a community for people of all traditions. I started off that way and have always been that way in my Facebook presence, that it would be for everyone, Muslims, Buddhists, Christians, Jews, it doesn't matter. So the community began to grow around these little meditations. And as things got more and more and more difficult, and especially with the pandemic and the social upheaval in our country, those little messages every day began to attract a community of people who felt like, well, that will get me through today. Something, it'll help me. And it did. It helped people a lot. So I collected them in this book, these meditations that I believe are little messages the Spirit helps me come up with. I've often said I write these, but I don't think I'm the author. There's a difference, if you know what I mean. And so I tried to collect these because they were, I thought, messages that would help people during a particularly tough time.
Yes. I've been the recipient of some of those messages of hope and courage myself. So if you started off at 4, I peeked today to see where you were, and you're closer to 30,000 followers now.
Yeah, that's right.
It's
amazing. Yeah,
it's really amazing. So thank you for not having enough cat pictures. We appreciate it.
I still don't have a cat. Right.
Yeah, there's a niche in the world for those who have cat pictures, but you serve your own niche, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's so funny. And it's interesting. I meet a lot of natives in this area, in the urban center around Detroit. And so many of us are not big fans of social media because we tend to want to do work in community, and social media can feel not doesn't feel as strong as our community when we're around each other. So I know that is a unique thing. And so, yeah, this book, these reflections, for those of you who are tuning in, maybe you don't own this book yet, and I highly recommend it. Those Facebook reflections, but let's take it away from Facebook. Let's put it back into just his spiritual morning reflections, are throughout this book on the pages, in italics, throughout the chapters. And there's these little moments where, yeah, it does feel very universal. And um, I think that's such a powerful thing when you say that these are really message for all and very inclusive. And you can see that, and even a cat picture can cause division on Facebook. But it seems that the message that the Spirit speaks through these, is very healing and helpful to just about all who read and listen. And
Yeah,
so
I
you
think that's
more
I
than,
think that's sort of part of the mystery of
mm,
all of this
mhm,
is how something which otherwise could be sort of trivialized, like Facebook, it's not where you'd expect to receive the wisdom of the Dalai Lama or something on Facebook, but it's there. Spirituality is in the marketplace. It's in the midst of the community in the 21st century. And if you want to go out into the marketplace or into the community where everybody of all shapes, sizes, and colors are moving, it's in social media. And so I think this spiritual viewpoint, just looking at life from a spiritual way and just sort of trusting your intuition spiritually,
mhm,
like I do each day when I write these. It's not a lot of mumbo jumbo or magic. It's just a human heart opening up, just saying, from your own experience, who you are as a human being, this is how I feel, and this is what I want to share. And I think the simplicity of that and the honesty of it is what really is the glue that binds the Facebook community together. And it touches me and helps me as much as I hope it does other people who come. And as this book will, to a different audience. This book, I think, will reach people with that same spiritual good news in their lives, hope and healing and mercy, um, whatever their faith tradition may be, and that this book will sort of take it out to a new community, a different community, and many people who may or may not be on Facebook.
correct. Yeah, and it's, I mean, if that is your hope and intention, I'm seeing it fulfilled. It's doing just that. Um, the title of the book, Ladder to the Light, um, speaks of a ladder, and then you frame the book around, the Kiva, and that is more traditional too. That's the Native American tradition, but you explicitly say throughout the book that this book is for all, through all traditions. But before we get too far, could you explain to us, to the listeners, what's the principle of the Kiva? What's the significance of the ladder and the metaphorical framework that you use throughout the book?
Yes, it is important. The Kiva is an underground worship space. That's an easy way to say it. And it's particular to, though not, I don't know if it's totally unique to the Southwestern peoples, but it's particularly evident in the Southwestern part of the United States among communities, indigenous communities like the Hopi and some of the Pueblo peoples. It's either circular or it can be rectangular, and it's a space like under the ground. There's wooden beams over the top, and so it's enclosed. And the only point of entry or exit is by a ladder, which leads down into the Kiva. So the Kiva itself is a very sort of wonderfully dark and in enclosed space. It's got a feeling of like a womb, the womb of the world in a way. It's a wonderful kind of darkness. It's not at all intimidating or negative. It's generative is a fancy word for it. It's full of life. And that ladder, you see that ladder rising up, a wooden ladder to be climbed rung by rung to return to the upper world. It's all part of the tradition of the indigenous faith of these folks that humanity emerged from within the earth. We emerged as a people onto the beauty of the earth that we see today. So the Kiva, well, I respect it as such a powerful spiritual image or message for people. I'm not in any way trying to speak for those who use the Kiva, the Hopi people or the Sunnis or anyone else. All of the people of those nations, the Kiva is unique to their way of worship and should be respected. What I'm doing is taking that image of being in the Kiva and that ladder going into the sunlight, and using that image as a metaphor for a spiritual ascent. And the whole thing of light and dark, ascending or descending, are universal again, kind of universal images. So it's respectfully using an image that and acknowledging it from the native tradition, and then lifting it up and letting people of different traditions see what it's saying to them as hopefully something positive. And so that's how it all blends together. That's how it works together, because the Kiva image is a wonderfully powerful image for people of all traditions and faiths.
Yes. Yeah, it's really helpful to see that image as like when we think of, and you compare and contrast the darkness that might surround us now, and the struggles and the conflicts and the even the lack of health or the death dealing, all the oppression, the things that are all around us. But you contrast that to the darkness of the Kiva, which is, like you said, a womb-like space of regeneration and rebirth, and how that's an opportunity for us collectively to come out of it. So you use the image, furthermore, of the ladder. Each rung becomes a chapter of your book. And as we ascend this ladder, we grow in our spiritual intuition and connection, but not just with the spirit, but with one another, and even ourselves. So your goal as you get to the top, what is the light to you? What is at the top of this ladder?
It's the images of the rungs of this ladder. It's a homemade ladder with wooden slats. It's sort of this organic image rising out of the Kiva, and each rung, like you were saying, is a different aspect of our spiritual journey, and it's one that we take and retake over and over again. So my book really is sort of continues to speak to these different levels or different places where we find ourselves. And it's not that one is necessarily higher or more important than another, but each rung has its own nature as part of the spiritual journey of any human being. We find ourselves on a rung of hope. There are moments in life when we're very hopeful. We find ourselves on a rung of action where we have to confront the reality around us and not be passive. So each rung has its own integrity. But the very top is what I call the rung of transformation, because I think ultimately spiritual life transforms us individually. It transforms our communities and our families. It can transform our nations, and it can, as we've all seen, it can transform the world, or most of it. Powerful spiritual teachings, people of faith, humble people who just want to lead a good life and a decent life, and who want to live in peace with one another. Those are incredibly important issues that are part of every one of those rungs of the spiritual journey.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I love, as I was reading through this, I could sense that these rungs, like you said, are not like in succession, like you have to do this and master it to then go to the next level.
Right.
I think thinking circularly would be more helpful at that point, just always returning and going deeper in our understanding of each of those rungs. But because it's so collective, like you said, it's transformative to not just ourselves, but our connections to place, our connections to people, to creator. This book doesn't very squarely fall into like a self-help book, because it's so much more than just self, although it's very healing to those who are reading and listening. your focus is so much more on the collective and on the whole. And I greatly appreciate that.
Well,
This
thank
ladder to
you.
the light. Yeah, you're welcome. I love how the ladder to the light is different than like the stairway to heaven, that imagination,
Mhm.
because it puts our spiritual orientation back to the earth, into this location, into our purposes here. So we're climbing up to arrive to where Creator has made us to function and to be. Um, and I was wondering, how does this orientation of, instead of just like, I'm trying to get out of this place, I just want to get to heaven, get me through this place, but instead to fully arrive here, how does that change in orientation? What does that do with our theology and our practice as people of faith?
Well, I think, for example, the Kiva image again, where I think the genius of the spiritual genius, theological genius of Native people uh, is clearly manifest in the example of the Kiva, because no, it's not a stairway to heaven, or you follow these rules, or you do what the hierarchy tells you, or you just believe this and nothing else. It's that kind of vertical, patriarchal going up, to be in the top, and a vertical power paradigm. The wonderful thing about the Kiva is it says you go in exactly the opposite direction. No, you don't go up to greater and greater power and glory. You go down. You look down to Mother Earth. You look down to the soil around you. You look down to the network of life that enfolds you. You look down to respect how you are a creature of God and made for a purpose and for a reason, not an accident of some lab experiment gone wrong, but no, an intentionally formed human being, a soul and a spirit designed to do something important. And it's for all of us. It is something that involves all of us and that touches all of us. So there's no hierarchy. It is community. It is the circle of life that is so typical of our, I'm sure you know as well as I, that among our people, that image of the circle of life, the hoop of the nation, very important.
Yeah.
And again, not a hierarchical symbol. So I think the beauty of the ladder to light and the image of the Kiva and the ladder is that it represents a going back into the earth as well as an arising out of spiritual life, because the flip side of the coin is important too. And that is, yes, you go into the Kiva and it's nurturing and warm and wonderful, and you'd like to stay there because you'd like to turn it into a bomb shelter or into a survivalist place. And don't go up because out there it's dangerous and difficult. The idea of the ladder is you've got to go, if you have spiritual integrity, you go back up. And where do you come? You come out in reality.
Right.
You come out into the everyday world where the sun shines and where it rains and where it's cold and hot and where people live and die in the real world. That's where your spirituality belongs. That's where it takes root and where it has its place. Otherwise, it's an escapist into either the paradigm of a patriarchy where you're more important than anybody else, and where that leads us, which is nowhere, or to go down into the earth to find your sources. But you live it out in the everyday world. And that's why my little book is an attempt to talk about a spirituality that works in the here and now, not one that is just made up, but one that really comes from the human experience.
That's so powerful. And you don't dance around those hard truths throughout the book. I mean, you speak about the heaviness and the things that your people have collectively gone through. You discuss the trail of tears. I mean, you live in that reality of the hard, like you said, the rains that come and the darkness that's there. But instead of forming an escape route, like you said, either down or up, but not here, your idea to combat the darkness is really just to turn on the light. And to find that light and to see that the spirit is there too, even in the darkness, the spirit is there. And I think that's so powerful because it allows us to be human, which is all we can be. And when we play God or when we play less than human is when we get into our troubles, isn't it?
It is true, isn't it? And I think the one of the words that will jump out, I think, for readers of the book is the family of humanity and human beings and being human and living in a human community. These things are true for all of us. And I don't want to ruffle anyone's feathers who's watching this interview, but I will say that in a very simple way, I have a faith that tells me that if there is a divine being who cares for all of us, it's really full stop for all of us. It's not cares for a few of us, but not the others, because they chose wrong, or because they believed wrong, or because they were the wrong kind of people, or because they were our political adversaries. So they obviously they don't count. Everyone counts. Everyone matters. Everyone is loved. I think that's the message that's in this book.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so beautiful. Thank you for that encouragement. If you don't mind, since we're talking about this spirit that universally speaks to all, created all, loves all, I would love to read a passage out of your book on page 95, specifically speaking of the sound of the spirit. Let's see. This is from one of your Facebook reflections, calls The Sound of the Spirit. What voice do you hear calling you to the holy? Is it the chant of somber voices in the meditation hall, a call to prayer sung out over the city, or a cantor's invitation to enter the tent of meeting? What speaks to you? How does it know your language of heart? We each have a spiritual sound, a code imprinted on our soul to which we respond. Before we learned the lessons of our faith, before we were taught to recite and repeat, we only had a sound, a beautiful, haunting sound. We heard it, we came to it, and we stayed. The sound of the Spirit is the voice of hope. It speaks in 1,000 ways, calling each one of us individually. And one of my favorite lines, the mystery is that we hear it as if it knew us by name. Such a beautiful reflection from the Spirit. You speak of the Spirit throughout this book, and I'd like to go back in your life and just hear from the same reflection before we memorized things, before we knew the rules, before we had our doctrines and those things. Spirit was there. I would love to hear how she showed up in your life. When was your first experiences with the Spirit?
I'd said that that I had been when I was small, that my grandfather would use the words Pilichi Shilombish, which is Pilichi Shilombish is Choctaw language, and it means spirit guide. And part of this, and the point was, they would say, someday, you may grow up and become someone who helps others spiritually. It's different saying you're going to be ordained, or you'll become a monk or a priest or something. It's saying you're God for people. And so you're trying to show everyone a path. And that spiritual understanding started with me then at a very early age, like around age 4, where I really did see the world through the lenses that there is a spirit out there that is loving and kind and generous to everyone. And it's not dividing us up into different types of people. And my role was not to go around telling other people what to believe, because that's not my job, or to judge other people for not believing what I believe, because that's not my job. My job is to help anyone I meet fulfill their own best journey in trying to lead a life that is a holy and good life, and hope they'll help me do it at the same time, and be as open to being changed by them as they are changed by me. And when you live that way, really live that way, look at what a healing that would have in this country. Look at how divided people are by something as ephemeral as a political opinion that can change on places like Facebook or other social media in the blink of an eye. But what's lasting and what's eternal, what's truly spiritual, that gives us all dignity and hope, is something much different and much deeper. And that's what any guide of the spirit is trying to help. And that's why I refer to the divine, the holy sort of person in my life as the spirit, because it's a generic word that many of us could understand in the broadest way as to who the higher power in our lives may be.
Well, I'm grateful for that mark on your life as a spiritual guide. That would be such a good way to sum up what this book is. It's just you walking the readers along as they travel with the spirit. So thank you for sharing that. It's very obvious that you have an intimacy with the spirit. How would you respond to those who are reading this? Maybe they're just hearing our conversation today and they're desiring to cultivate a stronger connection to the spirit that you say is accessible to all. What would your response to them be?
Wonderful idea. That's exactly the right impulse. Now you have to take it to heart, and that means you do not find your spiritual path. And this is only coming from my own subjective opinion, and I don't know any more about this than you do. But I can say that one thing you might want to think about is if it doesn't work for you inside where you are as who you are, you will not find it outside of you by going to other sources to tell you what is the right way to be spiritually. Trust your instincts. Your heart will tell you if you're in a religious service that doesn't sound right or doesn't seem to work right for you. Or if someone's telling you an idea about a book, or whether it's the Bible or any other, the Upanishads in Hinduism. Judge from your own inner self. And to do that, open yourself up to something bigger than who you are. And open yourself up by a life of being very honest and very truthful with yourself, and then find the community that supports you in doing the right thing. And it's not a solo journey. It has to be right for you inside, but you got to share it with other people for it to make a difference.
Right. And it sounds to me, it recalls the first chapter where you speak of the rung of faith, what you just described. We all have to begin to trust that
Yes.
there is this power around us, there is this spirit around us, and to move into that. But one of my favorite chapters of yours is the chapter on hope. I believe it was chapter 3, maybe. And you talk about how some people have their faith and they get their connection to the spirit, but then they keep it to themselves, and they stop there and they don't share it with the rest of the world, and hope that rung 3 is where you start to imagine a better future, imagine a collective of people that can live in harmony together. And it's where you take your faith into start taking your faith into action and into the community. So I love that you say this is not a solo endeavor. We are meant for one another. So that's really beautiful. Something that, what my biggest takeaway from this book, the first time I read it through, you stopped me in my tracks, and I was only 11 pages in, and I stopped because you said something I had never heard another human being say before. And you talk about peace. On page 11, you reflect and say, I am a person at peace with myself, at peace with the world around me. And granted, I was reading this in the middle of, the pandemic and the political, but everybody is like, where there's always darkness, there's always turmoil mixed with the light that's in our world. But I had never heard someone just so confidently say, I'm a person at peace. Like, I have peace with everything around me. And I was curious, what is the reason for your peace?
I am at peace. And I don't know why. I didn't get here on my own, so I can't tell you, well, this is how I did it. I don't know exactly how I became peaceful. I don't know certainly why I'm peaceful, because the world around me is not peaceful, and my life, like yours, turns on a dime. Today is a great day. Tomorrow, the phone rings, you pick it up, hello, and your world changes.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
in the midst of all of that, I found myself quite surprisingly at peace. I don't know when it happened. When did it change? When did that transformation of the last rung occur? Was it the 1 millionth prayer, or did it happen because this turned out the way I wanted? Or no, was it because I went to this service or that service, or bought this person's book, or listened to that preacher? Or no, is it because I found the mystery or the secret and nobody else knows but me? And I know I don't know anything about it. I can't sell it to you. I can't do anything. I can't even give it to you. I don't have the power. But I can do one thing, and that is tell you truthfully, I'm at peace. And I hope you will be too. And I believe that if we're kind to each other and honest, it can help you suddenly wake up one morning and realize it's true for you too. Yeah. And you can then share it by your witness to other people, and we can start healing people.
Thank you, Stephen. That kind of leads me into some of my last reflections on your book. When you talk about in chapter 5, the rung of action, doing something together, and you talk about how we often think that our ability to work together and to be unified and has to mean that we all have to think the same, believe the same, assimilate in the similar way for us to actually have unity. So we have to have conformity, basically, to have unity. And you push against that and say, like peace, we all have these universal things, desires and hopes, and peace being one of them. And we can work around our collective humanity, the tribe of humanity. We can work around that. And you speak specifically, you get a little bit practical, and you talk about disorganized social gatherings. And I loved that that phrase, the disorganized social gatherings around shared hopes. Having a meal, the beauty of having a meal together with people who are different than you, think different than you, look different than you, pray differently than you, and find that shared camaraderie. And you say some of the things that you should share around the table besides food. And you talk about 3 questions that we can ask that kind of poke at some of the universalities that all of us have. Share photos of your children. Talk about the funniest thing that happened in your family or about your family. And then one of the things you say that we can speak to each other about is our hopes for the future. So I would love for you to tell me and the listeners today, what are your hopes for our future?
I have a wonderful hope for the future. It's an amazing hope. Part of why I'm at peace, and I don't feel that I can explain exactly how this will work, but I know that there is a moment that is going to come when we cross over into a different way of thinking. Right now, we believe that everything must be geared to our technology, and that technology is taking us ahead as fast as we can run. And it's all that is ultimate importance. But there's another part of us that's expanding and growing. We're beginning to know each other as people, as human beings. I know more now about people who live in India than I ever could have learned even 5 years ago, 10 years ago. When I was born, I didn't know anything. I didn't understand what the life is like for Muslim people, and what their book is about, what the Quran is about, what Hinduism, what any other people's life is like. We're learning about one another, and we're beginning to discover a way to talk to each other and to share things that doesn't depend on hierarchies. What you and I are doing right now is revolutionary. We are 2 small people talking about big ideas with each other. What if there were 1 million of us? What if there were 10 million?
Yeah.
See?
That's a
Oh,
beautiful.
yes. And it all starts here with all of us who are tiny little seeds. Nobody special. But once we connect, we will grow.
Mm. Yes, my friend, we are better together. And as more connections happen, I see that unfold more and more. That's a very beautiful hope. Um, the ladder is meant for humanity to climb together. Um, Obviously, we can find ourselves individually in this book, but we all need to arrive to the top of the Kiva together if this is really supposed to work, and to face the darkness collectively, and shine our light through it. Um, this book, like I said, doesn't fit neatly into a self-help category because it does demand the collective, not just with our fellow humans, but also with creation, and the spirit. Um, but it's for the whole tribe of humanity. So I would love to. Is there any other reflections before I close out that you would like to share? Anything you'd like to share about your book to our listeners?
Oh, that's okay. You've been kind of listening to me talking long enough. I just am grateful for the chance to get to know you. And I hope you will tell others about it. This little book. It's just another effort to bring some light into life. So, but thank you for letting me talk.
Yeah, it's been beautiful. Like I said, I was really, really anticipating and looking forward to this. This is not a book that you're going to read once and put down. It's something I think most of the readers will pick up over and over again. I've read some reflections, um, of those who, on Amazon maybe, who are writing their reactions to the book, and it seems very universal that everyone's saying, I just want to pick it up and read it bit by bit or return to it. It was such a beautiful thing. And so thank you for sharing your connection with the spirit, and sharing these reflections with the rest of the world, not hoarding it to yourself, not hiding your light under, a basket, but letting it shine. So I'd love to end with page 105. You give a peace blessing, is kind of what I would call it. Um, and I'd love to, it's called All Things Come and Go. I would love to read that out for our viewers. Thank you for tuning in. I just pray that you would receive these words as a blessing of peace over your life. Be at peace on this blessed day, whether it brings sunlight or storms, serenity or struggle. Be at peace and passing through it, doing what needs to be done, living as fully as you can, as authentically as you can, at peace in your soul. Know that all things come and go on the way to where you are called to be. They pass around you, they pass over you, they pass under you, but they do not define you or contain you. Your life is not an inventory of pains or pleasures, but a sonnet of the spirit, a mystery fashioned from and for eternity, a strength so powerful that it can afford to be vulnerable to love. Be at peace on this blessed day. Blessings to you, my friend. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Yeah, okay.